Today's subject is a man whose name became a brand, whose smile sold billions at the box office, and whose stunts defied death and gravity, all while guarding his private world like a fortress. Tom Cruise. He redefined the action hero, led a movement, and lived at the center of one of Hollywood's most secretive power structures. This is the story of Tom Cruise and what happened to the only children who carry his name, his beliefs, and his absence. Isabella Cruise chose silence over spotlight. Born in 1992 and adopted by Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman shortly after birth, Isabella Jane Cruise entered a household ruled by two of Hollywood's most celebrated names. In public, she was the quiet girl holding hands with her A-list parents. In private, she was raised under the increasing influence of Scientology. Her earliest years were spent bouncing between film sets and homes in Los Angeles and Australia. But even then, the public saw little of her. Tom and Nicole fiercely guarded her privacy, rarely allowing press access or red carpet appearances. In 1995, when Isabella was just 3, the couple adopted a second child, Connor. For a while, the foursome projected the image of a close-knit family insulated from Hollywood's chaos. But by the late 1990s, cracks were forming. Tom's deepening devotion to Scientology clashed with Nicole's quieter Catholic roots. In 2001, the divorce came swiftly and decisively. Tom retained primary custody. At just 9 years old, Isabella made a choice that shaped her future. She stayed with her father in Scientology, distancing herself from Nicole, who would later admit that her relationship with her adopted children had become complicated. Her teenage years were marked by absence. While Suri Cruise, Tom's biological daughter from his next marriage, became a tabloid fixture, Isabella vanished. No premieres, no interviews, no headlines. No. She reportedly attended schools affiliated with the Church of Scientology and kept her social circle tight within its community. Around 18, she briefly studied at the Delamar Academy of Makeup and Hair in London, quietly carving out a creative life far removed from her parents' fame. In 2015, she married Max Parker in a secretive Scientology-affiliated ceremony at a London hotel. Neither Tom nor Nicole was publicly seen at the wedding, and while Nicole later claimed she was invited, press reports suggested otherwise. Isabella, now in her 20s, was choosing detachment, not rebellion, not attention. By 2019, she had become a face, albeit a low-profile one, for Scientology's London chapter, contributing a testimonial in the church's magazine and attributing her personal clarity to the faith's teachings. At the same time, she launched a modest clothing brand called BKC, Bella Kidman Cruise. The use of Nicole's last name raised eyebrows. Was it a signal of reconciliation? A nod to her roots? She never clarified, as usual. Through her 30s, Isabella has kept a life of near-complete privacy. She resides in London, far from the paparazzi zones of California. She does not give interviews, does not attend Hollywood events, and never speaks publicly about her parents, even when their names dominate headlines. Her presence online is minimal, her business ventures quiet and independent. In a family defined by spectacle, divorces, religious controversy, blockbuster premieres, Isabella chose distance. Raised by a man obsessed with control and public perception, Isabella turned that training inward, crafting a life that runs on silence, simplicity, and firm personal boundaries. And in that silence, she has become the one Cruise child no one can figure out, and perhaps the only one who prefers it that way. Connor Cruise, built loyalty, not legacy. Connor Cruise was born in January 1995 and adopted by Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman just weeks later, entering not just a family, but a machine of image, legacy, and belief. From infancy, he was raised within the insulated walls of Scientology, where obedience was praised, media was controlled, and emotion was measured. Unlike his older sister Isabella, Connor's early years unfolded with slightly more visibility. There were flashes of family life in front of cameras, the Cruises vacationing in Sydney, standing at movie premieres, or leaving church events. But after the high-profile divorce in 2001, Connor, only 6 years old, made the same choice as his sister. He stayed with Tom, and by extension, with Scientology. Nicole Kidman all but disappeared from his public life. The church's influence reportedly dictated both custody decisions and emotional boundaries. Nicole was labeled a suppressive person, and as Connor entered adolescence, his connection to her faded into ambiguity. In his teens, Connor began to surface again, this time as part of the Hollywood machine. At just 14, he was cast in the Will Smith-led film 7 Pounds, 2008, followed by a prominent role in Red Dawn, 2012. It looked like the Cruise legacy might have its heir. Handsome, camera-ready, and bearing the last name that could open any door, Connor's rise seemed scripted, but it didn't last. Around the time Red Dawn premiered, Connor quietly stepped away from acting. By 2013, the red carpet appearances stopped. The auditions faded. Hollywood had seen a glimpse of Connor Cruise, and then he was gone. He re-emerged in a different role, DJ. For several years, he spun records at events in LA, Miami, and even aboard Scientology-linked cruise ships. The music persona gave him temporary distance from both his father's shadow and the film industry's expectations. But again, the spotlight dimmed. In his late 20s, Connor made another pivot, this time toward Florida, where he embraced a life of fishing, grilling, and near-total privacy. His Instagram became a catalog of outdoorsman pride, deep-sea catches, barbecued ribs, and camouflage gear. He rarely showed his face, rarely captioned his posts. The transformation was striking. Tom Cruise's son had traded red carpets for rifle scopes. Reports in 2021 suggested he was living in a Scientology-controlled community in Clearwater, Florida, and remained deeply loyal to the church. In rare moments of publicity, he was photographed attending church events with Tom, appearing polished and calm, but never interviewed. Unlike Suri, who lives apart from her father, or Isabella, who built quiet distance, Connor appears to have aligned himself fully with Tom's world. There were whispers that Nicole tried to reconnect as he got older, inviting him to her 2019 wedding anniversary in Australia, but nothing was confirmed. Connor's silence speaks volumes. He doesn't disavow either parent. He just lives in a system where family loyalty is defined by alignment with belief, not biology. As of now in his 30s, he remains unmarried, childless, and rooted in Florida, pursuing hunting and fishing with the same intensity his father gives to stunt work. He has no known career in Hollywood, no plans for a return, and no public presence outside of a few curated posts. In a life that began with cameras and ended with camouflage, Connor Cruise didn't fade. He just chose a different kind of stage, one where his last name still means something, but only to those who know where to look. Suri Cruise escaped fame, found freedom. Suri Cruise was born into chaos and crowned by it. On April 18, 2006, the daughter of Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes arrived as the most famous baby in the world. Before she could walk, her name trended globally. Before she could speak, her face graced the covers of Vanity Fair and People. Paparazzi scrambled to capture even a blurry glimpse of her stroller. Unlike Isabella and Connor, who were adopted into fame, Suri was biologically born into it, Tom's first and only biological child. And with that came obsession, speculation, and control. For the first 6 years of her life, she was raised within the glittering but tightly managed bubble of Tom Cat. Scientology loomed large, though reports remain conflicted on how much of it Katie embraced early on. What's certain is that Tom intended Suri to be the next generation of the church's legacy. They attended events together, traveled under heavy security, and raised Suri as a symbol of Hollywood royalty. But behind the scenes, Katie Holmes was preparing her exit. In 2012, she filed for divorce in secret, fled New York with Suri, and cut all ties with Scientology in one of the most dramatic custody battles of the decade. Suri was only 6, and from that moment on, everything changed. She vanished from red carpets, was pulled from private Scientology-linked schools, and began a quiet, almost aggressively normal life in Manhattan. Katie took sole custody and raised her daughter in the open city, not behind gates or armed guards, but in public schools, coffee shops, and art classes. As the years passed, a clear pattern emerged. Suri was being rebuilt not as a celebrity heir, but as a grounded young woman with boundaries and independence. Katie walked her to school. They carried groceries. There were no nannies, no stylists, no jet-settling lifestyle, and perhaps most notably, no father. Since 2013, Tom Cruise has not been publicly photographed with Suri once. Numerous outlets have reported that he is no longer involved in her life, likely due to her mother's break from Scientology, which may categorize Suri as a suppressive person. Tom has never confirmed this. He doesn't speak of her in interviews. He doesn't attend her milestones. His silence is louder than denial. Meanwhile, Suri grew up. At 14, she was reported to be interested in fashion and the arts. She began choreographing school musicals, applying to colleges under her legal name, Suri Noel, borrowing her mother's middle name instead of her father's last. In 2023, she was accepted into Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, where she began studying design. She didn't post about it. There was no celebrity fanfare, just a blurry image of her backpack silhouette walking into a dorm, captured by a local outlet. At 18, Suri legally became an adult, free to make her own decisions. But she didn't run toward Hollywood. She didn't write memoirs. She didn't post confessions on TikTok. She simply moved forward, and in doing so, she made a quiet statement. She had survived the myth of Tom Cruise, not by confronting it, but by outgrowing it. Today, Suri lives independently, her life shaped less by the man who shares her DNA and more by the woman who shielded her from him. She is not a product of fame, but of escape, and that escape became her foundation. Of all the Cruise children, Suri is the only one who experienced both the center of the storm and the journey out. She is the unanswered question in Tom Cruise's legacy, and the proof that sometimes the greatest strength is learning how to disappear without ever running. One daughter chose silence. One son chose loyalty. One daughter chose to leave. Isabella didn't chase headlines. She disappeared into her own world, shaped by belief, untouched by noise. Connor didn't rebel. He stayed, stood still, and lived by the same code that raised him. And Suri, she didn't fight the system. She simply walked away, and in doing so, broke its grip. Tom Cruise gave them his legacy, but it was what he couldn't give, presence, permission, and freedom, that shaped who they became. If you found this breakdown powerful and want more deep dives into the hidden lives of Hollywood's forgotten children, subscribe to Legacy Uncovered. Your support brings these invisible stories to light. Thanks for listening.